Hi, I'm Chris,
And I'm Eli.
and we are the Landlord Gurus. We've been managing our own rental property for decades now, and we've created this show to share our experiences, tips, and best practices we've refined over the years. Thanks for joining us, whether you found us on YouTube or our podcast or on landlordgurus.com. Before we get started, just a reminder to like, share, and subscribe so you'll get notified when we put out new content. Hi there. Welcome to another episode of the Landlord Gurus podcast. I'm Chris. I've got Eli
Hello.
as well. And today we are going to be talking about a couple different property management software products out there that you may be familiar with. Well, one I'm sure you're familiar with, the other may or may not be. But so we're going to talk about and compare Avail and Zillow Rental Manager. So I'm sure you're all aware of Zillow, and a lot of it, through the home buying or property buying kind of side of things. But they also have a Zillow Rental Manager, they call it, which allows you to list your vacancies. And then they've got a lot of other property management software tools as well. And Avail is a full-featured property management software product. And we'll have links to both these products down here in our description. But, so Avail, they do things from being able to list your property to do tenant screening, collect rent, set up your leases, and do electronic signings, maintenance requests, and so forth. So, Eli, I think we'll just start by, we'll sort of run down all the different features, compare Avail and compare, with Zillow, and kind of talk about some of the differences between the two so that everyone out there, you can kind of make a decision for yourself based on what we talk about here. So,
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think the most important point here is that Zillow really does have a very extensive reach when it comes to the eyeballs of potential renters. So I don't know what the current numbers are, but I think they get something on the order of 30 million renters searching for rental properties per month. And that's big. And it's bigger than any other single other platform. And there's apartments.com and Zumper and Apartment List and Redfin and the list goes on and on. But we've said it many times, we believe that to really maximize your exposure and give yourself the best chance of having good candidates, it's important to advertise your vacancies on Zillow. So the biggest differentiator in terms of advertising between these two platforms is you get the Zillow network, which is Zillow and Trulia and HotPads by listing through Zillow. Listing on any one of those platforms gets you on all three. And with Avail, you get a long list. It syndicates. You put your ad on Avail, and it syndicates out to Zumper and PadMapper and apartments.com. I'm not sure about Redfin actually at this point. Realtor.com, which is
Apartment List.
Right. So
yeah, they claim, they say that it's over a dozen of these listing sites. We don't need to get into every single one of them here, but
no,
there's a lot.
But the takeaway is do both, so that you get the maximum coverage. And that really is also the strength of Zillow. They're best at advertising, best for advertising, basically, because they have such a strong reach. So, and I guess, that being said, we can move on to kind of some of the differences in the ways that these two platforms handle applications, for example. So once you've got your ad out there and you've got somebody that's interested, you can have people apply directly through those platforms, so either of them. One tip, it's a preference, but for me, I turn off the allow direct applications on Zillow because people can kind of shotgun out, without really reviewing or inquiring about a property. Right. They can send an application directly to you with no effort at all, really, just a click.
Right. So you've got an application from somebody that you've never even heard from before, never even met. They've never seen the place.
Yeah.
And it just shows up as there's an application. And for a place like where we are in Seattle, where there is a first in time requirement where you have to kind of offer units to the, people who qualify based on the order in which the applications were received. So if you've got one that, you've never even met before and it just comes in,
right,
you may end up having to be stuck with it.
And, it's not a bad problem to get applicants who qualify that meet your criteria. But in places where we have this first in time, you have to look at every single one of them in the order that they come in. So you can be inundated with noise basically, and have kind of a lot of wasted time. So
And then I just thinking out of principle, if someone has applied to the property without even taking a tour or seen it,
right.
or even met you, I mean, I think they may say that, yeah, they still want it, but I don't think just out of experience, you're not really setting anybody up for success.
Yeah,
Nobody.
nobody.
You're going to run into all kinds of issues, and they're going to possibly be unhappy with the property down the road as well.
And they've probably applied for 3 or 5 or 20 other places in the 20 minutes they were sitting there looking at, tapping things on their phone. So anyway, the other thing is that Avail will allow you to set some custom application questions. So that's handy because you can decide, based on your screening criteria, what to ask about. And that will, that gives you important insight when you're kind of evaluating, potential tenants. So this is part of kind of the general sense that you may get out of this conversation, that Avail will generally offer a little bit more robust and sometimes significantly more robust features than Zillow does. Zillow does advertising great, and you reach a lot of people, but where it comes to the customization and added features, Avail offers significantly more.
Yeah, and Avail also with the applications, they will they can contact your references for you and check references and verify residency in advance, so that you're not having to do that yourself.
That's an automated email that Avail sends, having asked the applicant whether it's okay. So you don't have to go through that step of getting permission from the applicant to contact references. Some references won't talk to you without some kind of a form documenting that your applicant has given consent to do that. So this is an email that as soon as they apply, gets sent to the rental references, their rental history that the applicant has provided, and it gets sent out to these past landlords. So I think that's a great feature. Actually, that's one of my favorite features, because I don't like sitting there and writing the emails. It doesn't take that long, but I love the fact that I don't have to do that.
Or having to call them and cold call them and kind of play phone tag and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Right.
I agree.
Right. So how about screening, Chris? Let's see. Both of the platforms offer screening reports, and they are, I believe, on Zillow, the applicant always pays, and with Avail, the landlord can choose whether or not to pay for screening reports or to have the applicant pay.
Exactly. And Zillow allows for those applicants to share their screening reports with other landlords as well. So, in a lot of ways, that's very useful to the applicants. They can just kind of do it once and pay once, and they've got 30 days to, and like you said, that kind of leads them to then share that report and share that application out to other, for other properties, even before having seen it, just because they have that ability to. So, in a lot of ways, it's a benefit for the applicant in that they can just pay once and have those reports. But with Avail, they don't really let you do that. It does cost a little bit more, but the landlord can choose. I think the landlord can still choose kind of what different criteria or different parts of the screening report they want to ask.
So that's credit, eviction, criminal history, those are the main three, and identity. Check that. I think there are 3 separate reports that you can choose from.
Right.
With Avail, I always chose the bundle, and
it's the full bundle. Yeah.
And Avail, I will say, is a little bit on the expensive side for screening. They charge $55 for the full bundle, and I think Zillow provides something similar, and they only have one option for $35. Both platforms will weed out where, in places like Seattle, where we're not allowed to review criminal history when we're considering applicants, they remove that. So you don't get that. You don't have to jump through hoops to demonstrate that you didn't look at it. It just doesn't come to you.
Right. It just doesn't come. Exactly. Yeah. That is a benefit, definitely.
Yeah. And then both of them do that.
Okay. So then, once you've screened, and we can move on to lease documents and electronic signing. So both products, Zillow and Avail, allow you to do that. Zillow, I think is in the past only allowed that in a handful of states, and I think that's changing. There's more and more. I'm not 100% sure if it's all 50 states now where you can do that. I don't think so.
No, I looked fairly recently, and I think it was 38 states or something along those lines. So it's a lot. And what this is lease documents that have been reviewed by lawyers who have knowledge of the landlord-tenant law in any given state. And it's increasingly important because laws are changing all over the place, and in some markets more than others, but you have to stay on top of it. And it's really important to have the proper documentation.
Yeah. Yeah. And each state, has their own different rules and requirements, and they might be slightly different from state to state. So it is important to have one specific to your state. And we've talked about this before, and it's, it's sometimes even a lease that's specific to your location or city.
Yeah. And I advocate having a relationship with a local landlord-tenant lawyer who you can ask questions to, just so in any case, no matter what document source you're using, that if you have a question and you're not sure, you have somebody who really knows. Because, Washington State is very confusing now, and Avail does a great job with the state document, but, Seattle or Everett, or, they may have additional things. So you have to be on top of it. And local rental housing association membership is a good idea as well.
Right.
So
now with Avail, they have a kind of a lease wizard tool, so that it'll pre-populate your applicant's information straight from their application, pre-populated on the lease, and then kind of walk you through various questions that it asks you as the landlord about what kinds of things you need to include in your location. And they've got a local assist feature that, customize it to your specific location. I don't know if they get as granular as specifically Seattle area rules, but, it covers a lot of places, with the location specific clauses and attachments need to be there.
Right. And Zillow doesn't do every state, and they do populate the applicant's information, and the steps are similar, where you step through, like, what's the term, how long is this lease going to be for, what's the security deposit, what's the rental rate, and what are the rules, that type of thing. Avail just offers a more granular, more complete analysis and process to build the good document. And also with the paid membership, they give you the opportunity to include your own clauses, which can be anything from just something that you write in the form as you're creating it, or you can upload or copy and paste your house rules, which say no satellite dishes and, no barbecuing after 9 p.m. or whatever, those types of things. So again, more robust, just more full featured.
And they both allow you to sign those leases electronically as well. That's pretty common, pretty standard.
Which is awesome.
Most platforms.
I have to say that's property management software. That's one of the biggest things I like, because I never liked standing there looking at a lease document with somebody in the kitchen of the rental.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Another big fan, or a big feature that I'm a fan of, is rent collection. And again, most of these property management softwares do have rent collection features. Avail does, and Zillow does as well. So the differences being, with Zillow, it's free for everybody, right, to collect rent. Payments are deposited directly into your bank account. 3 to 5 days is generally the rule.
So this is an ACH payment. So it's
free ACH,
which is a bank-to-bank transfer, where the tenant has put their banking information into the platform, and you put yours into the platform, and that it's facilitated at their back end, to go bank to bank.
They can even pay with credit and debit card, but they do charge a transaction fee, usually 2.93%.
Pretty standard.
Which is pretty standard.
Right. Yeah. Some differences are that Avail will allow you to direct payments to multiple different bank accounts. So, I have a number of different properties, and each of those properties has an associated bank account. So I find that's indispensable for me. And Zillow will only allows you to direct rent to one bank account.
There is, if you are on Avail's free plan, there is a charge to the tenant for the ACH transfer. It's $2.50 per transfer. But if you're on the premium plan, the paid plan, then it is free.
Right. And the transaction fee, if you're on the free plan, is automatically assigned to the tenant. You as the landlord can't cover that. So what I was having to do was to lower the rent amount. I didn't want to bait and switch with people who are coming in. I didn't want to say, well, the rent is X, but now I'm charging you X plus $2.50. So I'd have to budget down, and I didn't like doing that. So ultimately, the benefits of the paid plan became worthwhile. And another benefit is that the transaction speed is improved. So you're looking at it as it can be as quick as a day for the deposit to hit your bank account. I think these are tricky because weekends and holidays and that type of thing, in our experience, a standard ACH payment takes generally 3 to 5, maybe a day or two more sometimes when things get in the way. And whereas the expedited payments are taking kind of more like 1 to 3. And
Right.
that's, I think, what a realistic, in my experience, that's what's realistic. So.
Okay. So the next thing we will talk about is financial tracking and reporting. Most property management software tools out there have some sort of basic finance and reporting tools. Some will give you elaborate reporting tools and where you can export everything via spreadsheet to your accountant, things like that. Make it easy come tax time. With Zillow and Avail too, the financial tracking and reporting features are somewhat limited compared to some of these others. Though I believe Avail's is getting better. They are rolling more and more features out kind of all the time.
Yeah, just recently, I think they've rolled out some improvements on that front. And the way things are going there, not so much with Zillow, but with Avail and some other platforms, is that they're building features where you can most often import a transaction from a bank or credit card, so that but with either Avail or Zillow, you effectively have a pretty handy rent roll. It's pretty easy to say, okay, well, how much rent is coming in, and you can take a look at this month or the last year in either case. Where the sophistication is coming in, like sorting by property and then also assigning expenses, not just income, but expenses to individual properties and even units. So we're getting closer to kind of a QuickBooks type experience where you can say, okay, yeah, that's maintenance and it goes to unit B at, 535 North Portland.
Yeah, exactly. So you get all that, down to the granular unit level, and you can actually then see how each unit is performing, both income and expense.
If you want to.
If you want to, exactly. Right. Which, in some of those products does make it more complicated to actually do that. Sometimes you're just, by default, you kind of have to assign income and expenses so that it can do that. But if you don't need it, sometimes it kind of makes a little bit more effort, or just a little bit more complicated, harder learning curve right off the bat.
Yeah, but not as hard as QuickBooks. I mean, at least, and this is an area where I don't have a huge amount of knowledge about what Avail is and what their newer features are. But, I think what they're moving towards is like pre-established categories. So, maintenance or utilities or gas, things that it's going to recognize expenses as common rental expenses, and that where you don't have to set up, complex,
just set up your own
accounts and categories and kind of build this whole structure from scratch.
Right. That is the thing about these landlord software tools, is they are built for landlords.
Mm-hmm.
They're, with the common categories that landlords need, not, extraneous ones that, QuickBooks has that don't apply to property at all.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the benefit of doing it through one of these specialized platforms.
Right. Okay. So we talk about maintenance, and, with both of these platforms, and I think a lot of the others, maintenance and just kind of general tenant communication, there's a big overlap. So essentially both of these platforms have a messaging feature, which will be very familiar to most people, because lots of platforms do, where it's kind of like text messages, but they're all stored in the platform. So I've been unsure about how much to do that versus like email or offline. And I'm coming around to, I've used Avail to communicate with tenants, and it is kind of nice that it's right there, and
it keeps it all there. You have one place to look. You're not checking your phone for text messages or checking Outlook for your, email threads.
I don't like getting text.
Contain it all in one spot. It just makes it simple.
And where maintenance comes in, they allow you to send the tenants to send photos and video of an issue so that you can then correspond about it. And you can also bring, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you can bring vendors into the loop now.
You can invite your own personal contractors to the conversation.
Right.
They can then at that point jump in and schedule or, work out some of the logistics directly with the tenant.
Right. Or ask questions about like, okay, well, what was happening when that drain clog happened? And is there a stopper in that sink? Which will tell you, well, or a screen. Okay, well, it's probably hair, so, you can kind of put everybody in the same room effectively, while only you needing to contribute your part, and people can ask questions, communicate, share pictures, coordinate times, that type of thing. Zillow, I don't believe does that. I think maybe they have some basic image sharing. I'm not even sure about that, to be honest, but you may be able to send images there, but I don't think you can't bring a third party in.
Yeah, I don't think it makes this little loop quite the same way. Whereas, yeah, I mean, this just happened to me yesterday. I got some photos from a tenant, their broken toilet.
Okay. Good.
To go, let's just do this on the platform. Okay, can you resend this on the platform? And that way we can have it there, as opposed to now having to go, forward this email to the contractor.
Right.
Let's go do this on the platform. Make it easy. So, it's a bit of a learning curve. You may have to walk your tenants through some of this stuff, especially if you're introducing this for the first time, because for them, it's obviously easier just to shoot that email or send you a text sometimes.
Yeah, the text. That's the one I try to stay away from, because they come straight to me at any hour of the day.
Right.
All right. What else? Anything else we haven't covered, Chris? I think we got to
talk about pricing. Yeah.
Okay.
So, this is a thing. Like, property management software, often it costs money to the landlord to get
right.
Zillow is free, right? And that's kind of their big selling point. It's all free. The only place where they really charge you as the landlord is when you set up your listing. They try and push the upgraded premium listing package, which can't remember what that is now. Is it?
Yeah, it's $30.
$30
for 90 days, up to 90 days of listing, and that gets you kind of more prominent placement. I think you come up, you go to the top of searches, and you're promoted.
Right.
So,
yeah. But otherwise, if you don't want to do that, you can still list for free.
And they've been all over the board on that. They've gone from free to $9 a week to $1.49 a day, but they pretty much settled back to like $29.99 for a 90-day listing. Whereas Avail does not charge you to advertise, to syndicate to this, dozen plus network of sites. So,
right. So with Avail, if you want to sign up for a premium package, and that costs $7 a month per unit, and that gets you the free ACH rent payments for your tenants. That gets you next day of rent payment, the fast pay.
Right.
Faster. I mean, you can customize your applications, customize lease agreements.
It gets you right. You do not get to customize the lease agreements without the paid membership, I think, right?
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
You get the lease agreements and e-signature. I think maybe
you can still. I think you can still do the e-signature. I think we'll have to go check and make sure that is the case. But yeah, there are certain things you can do with the free plan, and then to get the full kind of the full Monty, you got to upgrade to the unlimited plus is what they call it.
$7 a month per unit, right?
Per unit. Whereas Zillow, basically the tenant pays the screening, it's free ACH. So in a lot of ways, it can be cheaper to use Zillow, but you don't get as much.
You get more basic features. All right.
Okay. Yes, that's sort of the rundown between Zillow and Avail. We've got an article on our website that's got, breaks all this down into more detail. You can actually, get comparisons, by-side comparison on all these different categories that we just talked about today. So we'll put the links here as well. So go check that out. And make sure to like and subscribe.
Yeah, thanks for watching.
Do all the things.
Subscribe so you get notified when we put another one of these out. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.
Everyone.